Some more concerns that were brought up. This is by Smith et al. From 2013. One of their big criticisms was that they did not think it was testable. Predictions cannot be made and tested to evaluate it. This is a big problem as far as it being potentially a scientific theory. It's too general. It requires all of the biopsychosocial information and is therefore unwieldy, right? You have to collect all of this information. I got to have all of the information between all the different components to see what is the actual interaction, and then I have to make a decision about what the interaction is. It doesn't actually give a particular method. The model doesn't specify how to operationalize it, which is what a model is for. Okay? The fundamental flaw is that it doesn't tell you how to consistently get the relevant aspects of each domain for each patient visit. And their suggested solution to make the model scientific was to systematize the interview and data collection processes so that it's repeatable. All right, so then it could be testable. So let's look in terms of what they mean by the testability aspect of this. And I always like to do this. I think this is fun. Okay, so what I'm going to have you all do, we're going to do a little class participation here. I'm going to have, actually, we're just going to do the second row. I'm going to have the second row stand up. If I did the entire class, the entire conference, this would take all day. So if the second row could stand up, a couple of you guys I'm going to have to knock out. You know what I'm going to do. Don't you? You don't? Okay. Sandy, you might know what I'm going to do here. All right. So what I want you to do is try to guess my rule. Right? The sequence of numbers, 2, 4, and 8, meet my rule. So what I want you guys to do is ask me questions. You can give me 3 sequences of numbers, and I will tell you whether or not it also meets my rule. And when you think you know my rule, have a seat. Okay? So, go. Yeah, Sandy, you're out. Don't be shy. There's no wrong.
Is there multiplication involved?
No. Just so give me 3 numbers. Oh. What you want to do is give me 3 numbers, and you're trying to see if that also meets my rule.
1, 2, 4.
That meets my rule. 1, 2, 4 meets my rule. Yep.
3, 6, 12.
3, 6, 12 meets my rule. Any other ideas? Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay. Hey. You guys still in?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure I follow. There's people sitting down.
Yeah. So if you think you know the rule, you can have a seat. This is live entertainment, folks. You never know what's going to happen. Yes?
0, 0, 0.
0, 0, 0 does not meet my rule. Okay, got any other? Okay, so go ahead and have a seat. What do you guys think my rule is? Any? Doubling the previous number does not meet my rule. That is not my rule. A gradual increasing numbers, that's right. Nick got it. So my rule was just that the numbers had to be increasing in order. Okay, so what this is meant to be a test of is to see the types of questions that people ask when they're trying to test a theory, right? And usually in this game, people ask questions that they think are consistent with the rule, right? 2, 4, 8, 1, 2, 4, things like this, right? But we don't really get, I mean, you could go on forever and ever and ever. You could go like 1,000, 2,000, 4,000. You could throw out any sequence of numbers, and it's still not going to get you to that my rule was just an increasing number, usually until you try to ask a question that breaks the rule, right? And so this is an example of a couple of things. For one, this is meant to be an example of what confirmation bias is. We are humans, and we tend to be more biased in the direction of seeking confirmation, and you hear confirmation bias thrown out there all the time. This is an entire room of critical thinkers, and we still demonstrate confirmation bias. This is not a problem of people who are of weak intelligence or are not thinking critically. This is a human issue. We are humans. We have confirmation bias. This is just how we're built, right? Now, the other thing that this potentially shows is the value of a falsification question. Okay? So now that you know kind of what I'm after, now I'm going to give you the Wasson selection test. Okay? All right, so my rule is if the card shows an even number on one face, then its opposite face is red. Okay, how would you test my rule? I'm going to let you think about this for just a second, and then we'll do a show of hands thing here. Okay, so you're going to be allowed to flip over one of these 4 cards. Okay, so you think about which card you want to flip over to test my rule. Okay, so if you would like to turn over the 3, raise your hand. Okay, if you would like to turn over the 8, raise your hand. Good. If you'd like to turn over the red card, raise your hand. Okay, and if you would like to turn over the brown card, raise your hand. Okay, good. So the correct answer, what you're actually looking for here, is to turn over the 8 and the brown card, actually, right? So when you turn over the 8 card, you'll know whether the other side is brown or red. But you don't necessarily know that all even numbers, right, or that red cards only have even numbers on the other side of them. So you have to turn over the brown card to see whether that's true as well. Okay? So again, now that you even know what I'm asking for, it's still kind of a hard thing to do. Falsification is not a natural process for us. It feels like we're swimming upstream a little bit. Okay, and so this guy's Karl Popper, philosopher of science. You know, again, these what ifs, this is where I get a little nervous. I'm talking philosophy of science, which I'm really into, but if somebody really knows their philosophy, they'll hand me my lunch pretty quick probably. But what he said was what actually was the line of demarcation of what was a scientific inquiry was whether or not it could be falsified. Okay, whether it had the potential to create a prediction that could be shown to be wrong. Okay, if the only way, if the problem had no solution that could not be falsified, then it's not a scientific question. Okay.
Get your questions in.
Yeah.
Anybody? I don't see any. What do you got?
All right. Oh.
Okay. We'll be patient. There is a thank you from both Diane and Robert Rex. Thank you. Great unpacking, says Diane.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks, Diane,
Thanks,
for
Diane.
playing. Here's Sandy. What's the difference between a model and a framework?
So a model is, so the question, what is the difference? Oh, yeah, it's right up there. I don't have to repeat it. So a model is meant to be a carrying out of a theory, right? How does this operate in the real world? If this theory is true, what should that look like, or how should we be able to use it? Is my understanding of that, right? So it would be, so the theory, for example, the biopsychosocial model is based upon, or what Engels said was based upon, was general systems theory, which is basically the idea that the whole is greater, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? If you make a change in one aspect of it, the change in the other two is going to be bigger than if the change happened on their own, right? So a model of the biopsychosocial might be something where if you changed this social factor, you would tend to see this particular change in the psychological and the biological aspects of it that go along with it, right? It's meant to be a bit more predictive. So versus a framework can be a bit more loose. It doesn't. It's not quite as constrained. Theories might be generated from frameworks. Predictable or falsifiable tests might grow out of that framework. But it's meant to be something that kind of guides. In the case of a clinical framework, it might be something that gives you ideas to organize your treatment.
Okay, and then we had a flood of questions. They
Oh boy.
really didn't want to play your
They didn't
game.
want to play my game. No more numbers questions.
Okay, so from Alice, For those of us who have not heard about the Moseley-BIM study, can you tell us more about that?
Oh, yeah, okay. So, go from the top of my head here, which I'm pretty bad at usually, but I'll do my best. So what they did was they looked at it, they recruited large numbers of patients. One group went through explain pain. Right? They went through the explain pain curriculum, right? And they went through it in a rigorous manner. I mean, the therapist who went through, or the therapist who administered the treatment were trained by Lorimer Moseley. And I mean, he's the guy who came up with it and teaches this, right? So it's not like you can say they weren't doing real explain pain. Okay, so they went through a full regimen of explain pain. The other group went through a placebo education, I believe, and they let it run. They looked at the results, and they were equivocal, right? For their primary outcome measures, they did find some things in their secondary outcome measures, but they couldn't make conclusions. That basically is a step towards maybe now we need to look at another study with now those things as the primary outcome measures, right? And the secondary outcome measures, I think, were related to cost of care. There was some indication that the people who'd been through the explain pain treatment had less healthcare expenditure. So that's something else I think they'll
Yeah, and I
look
think
at.
also decreased disability. So maybe their pain didn't go down. I reviewed that article for Physio Network.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thanks for standing up here with me.
You're welcome. I'm here for you. Yeah, and it really was. Is it okay if I say one more?
Please,
thing?
yeah.
So the placebo, right? So like, what's placebo education? And it was actually really neat. They were basically just listening, and if it's turned into an awkward stare, be like, "What are you doing this weekend?" Like, so it was like
Right.
really just. It really, or actually, it wasn't even I wouldn't even consider it placebo education, but more along the lines of, if I'm remembering correctly, of just professional interaction.
Was that the one on acute pain?
Yes, I believe that's right. Acute low back pain. Yep.
So it's actually, that's the Adrian Traeger one. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Adrian Traeger
So
was
Adrian
the
Traeger,
primary.
and there is also a podcast.
There's a
on that.
podcast on that. Shameless self-plug.
But it is a really neat study, and that is a great point about Professor Moseley, is that he's like, is this right? Even though it's his own work.
Yeah, yeah. Again, the how might this be wrong? I mean, that is, you see so many research projects out there where the proponent of the method is solely focused on proving that it works, right? So it's pretty cool that the proponent of this method set out to show that it didn't work, because if the idea, and what Popper always said, I brought up Karl Popper, is that a strong theory will withstand a serious attempt to refute it, right? So the more serious the attempt at the refutation, if a theory can withstand that, the stronger the theory is standing on the other side, right? So there's value to this. I mean, kudos to Dr. Moseley for saying, I'm going to look for whatever it will take to show that this might not work, because if it comes out on the other side, then it's a stronger theory. Okay.
Yep, awesome. Okay, so now we have a question from Jennifer Carr, and there's actually some conversation around it, but we'll let you have a go at her question.
Okay.
In terms of commonalities of those who live well with pain, can we teach these commonalities to people who are not living well with pain? Can you elaborate on these commonalities?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? So at this point, I don't know if you can bring that slide back up so you can look through Bronny's chart here. There it is. So this is what they saw as the commonalities, and she's got them listed out here, and the article is really good. They split it out into some really specific categories, really well organized. So what they saw is that as a person was trying to achieve what was called self-coherence, so this is this kind of coming together, I think it's consistent with this idea of repersonhood. As they're trying to make sense of their issue, they would come to they called it naming, basically assigning a name to their problem, getting something that they could call their problem, right? And they gained some predictability. They no longer felt like it was so unpredictable, the things that were going to happen to them. They still would have flares, they still would have problems, but they had some idea of how that was going to play out. So it got a little bit more predictable. The existing portion, I'm drawing a blank on that. Flexibly persisting was the other big aspect of this. So making sense and flexibly persisting were the two big themes that they saw, and that consisted of occupational engaging. And occupational was not just work, this was just continuing to participate in activity, the things that they do, okay? Successful coping strategies, and they had a big kind of interesting series of categories that went along with that, all the different ways that they coped. And then future planning, again, it kind of goes along with the predictability of it, having the ability to plan for the future, to not feel like you can't ever make plans or do anything because you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. So the question about is there, could you bring that question back up again so I could see how it was worded? About whether going at these different categories and if that can be taught. I think that is the question that nice qualitative studies like this bring out, right? That's the question. So we know that people, or it looks like people that are successful with chronic pain have these things in common, and it would make sense that if we could try to get people that weren't behaving in that way to behave that way, that maybe there would be some impact of that, but it doesn't always shake out how you think. That's something that you would have to test. So that's why I feel like this is kind of a nice first step. Bronnie I'm sure would be chomping at the bit to add if she were here, but that's kind of where I feel like it's at. It's potentially that is where it's going to be, but at this point all we can say is that it looks like that this is what they have in common.
All right, next question is from Mark Cargala. What would your recommendations on how we can translate this view of BPS to our new clinicians or students about to enter their respective profession?
Yeah, I think the cool thing about this is that because it is experiential and it's about what is common about experience, it makes sense. It feels familiar because we have all experienced pain of some sort or another. So I actually think it kind of helps. It kind of makes it a bit easier to translate some of the biopsychosocial aspects that we like to teach, because then you could put them in the context of, okay, yes, people don't feel pain like a series of like, okay, you know what pain feels like? It feels like, about 70% depression, and, like I'm on the lower 30% of the socioeconomic status, and I'm kind of catastrophizing. That's not what pain feels like. But people, this idea of like, when I hurt, I can't do the things that I want to do, and it feels like, my body is not my own body anymore. It's kind of fighting against me, and I can't go see my family, and I can't play with my grandkids, and I don't have the confidence that when I try to do something, I'm not going to be in bed all day tomorrow. Like that just makes that people get that kind of from a gut feeling, I think. So using that information and saying, okay, this person, part of their presentation is their knee hurts and they're worried that it's never going to feel right again, and it's no longer the same knee that they had, and now they can't go out into the community and play bridge once a week like they love to do, because that's where they go and they meet their friends, right? That can kind of give focus to some of the biopsychosocial aspects, right? So now we know, we've got a better idea of how that knee pain impacts their ability to get out and socialize, and we know that how much the fact that they can't get out and socialize that way makes that knee pain all the more important for them, right? So I feel like it clarifies things in both directions.
Very good. I think we have time for at least one more.
Okay.
So this one's from Richard McLemoyle. Putting this into application, do you try to set targets for re-inhabiting the self? Is there any research on self-identification of the idea being helpful?
Yeah, so basically what I just described is kind of how I put this into application. I'm not aware of any particular research on self-identification, but what I was thinking would be a neat next direction to look into this would be there should also be a phenomenology of recovery, right? So this is the phenomenology of what it is to be in chronic pain. It would make sense that there is also kind of like what Bronnie is getting at with her study, what is the commonalities, the essential aspects of the experience of recovery, right? And with that, we might be able to, again, generate some scientific hypotheses that can be tested. But at this point, I'm not aware of anything that's on that.
Awesome. All right, let's do one more. The last one will be from Jared Hall. Do you feel that the BPS framework can coexist with the concept of inactivism, the 5 E's of Stilwell and Harmon?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm the person to really speak to that in too much detail. I know in that paper they go through the changes that they think need to be made, and they advocate for a big turn towards a first-person perspective. You know, I would say I feel like we need to get that first-person perspective. There's been talk about getting the patient's voice into guidelines. We're going to have a patient panel tomorrow. There's been, I know, talking to Joe and Keith that they were at the IASP and they were at CSM. So, like, there's good things happening there. But in terms of that particular model, how it coexists with inactivism, I'm just not familiar enough with inactivism probably to speak to that very well. But I would encourage anybody who is interested in that to look at that paper, the inactive approach to the biopsychosocial model. See, again, I can't think of these things off the top of my head.
That sounded pretty right.
Yeah, the Stilwell paper. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We're good.
All right, thank you.
All right, and thank you, Cory. All right, so we have another break. We're going to start up with the second to last speaker at 4:15. So have a quick break, and then please come back.